Wake up, dust yourself off, make some coffee, get those boogies out of your eyes, wipe the lipstick off your lips from that person you kissed last night. It may have been a bad decision. She was an ex. And, that's going to be a weird talk later today. Maybe you should ignore your phone. Ignore, too, the scale. But don't ignore those donuts in the cabinet. Why are they in the cabinet? I don't know. You put them there last night. It was a crazy party. Happy New Year's.
But don't ignore your Google podcast. There it is. That's just telling you there's a new podcast.
There's a new podcast from us. So
was that you reading from your new romantic novel? Classical yet modern.
New romantic novel.
Yeah, your newest AJ's side business is writing romantic novels.
Oh, dang.
Can we start a rumor with this?
Sure. Yeah. Anyway, it's New Year's.
Let all acquaintance be forgotten.
Never brought to mind. Let all acquaintance be forgotten in the words of old lang syne.
We're really good at knowing the words to that song.
I said in the woods of old lang syne. I don't think that was it.
It's like half in Gaelic. It's not our fault.
Is that really
Is it Gaelic?
Old Lang Syne, isn't that Gaelic?
I don't know.
Or Irish?
You know all these things.
I don't know. I'm just kidding. It's not Latin.
Latin is almost always my guess also.
In any case, the old philosophers said, know thyself. And if you are intending to have some sort of New Year's resolution, well, you can't change yourself till you know what you are, right? What are you changing from? You got to know what you are before you know where you're going, or else navigation becomes difficult. So how do you do that, listener? How do you figure out who you are? Is it the quiz that tells you what Harry Potter house you are? Is it the quiz that tells you what jungle animal you are, or whether or not you look attractive in glasses? Maybe what cast member of Saved by the Bell? I feel like those
BuzzFeed articles.
Yeah, I feel like those are okay.
Did you do your Patronus test to see what your Patronus was in Harry Potter?
Yes, I'm an Irish sheepdog. Why are you laughing at me?
Because you herd children. That's your job.
Oh, well.
I'm not fluffy enough to be Hufflepuff, and I'm not brave enough to be Gryffindor. I feel like I've just got enough.
House.
You're talking about the Patronus.
It's a little animal that you shoot.
Oh, mine's a centaur.
Guys. Is that true? You just made that up.
No, but my spirit animal is a centaur.
What does that mean? You just really identify with centaurs?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I used to look like one when I had dreadlocks. I'm serious. I looked like a centaur. And then,
but you didn't have horse legs. Like you clearly did not look like a centaur.
Did you know me in college? I don't think you did.
He's of ill humor.
That's the thing. I'm a little bit cranky. I'm a little bit dangerous. I'm mysterious, and I know about the stars.
This makes no sense to me. This is like when I used to work at Krispy Kreme and this lady walked in who had been drinking and she commented that I looked like Spider-Man, but objectively I don't. Like I wasn't. I didn't have a mask on. I didn't
glasses. That's probably it.
No. But she said Spider-Man. She didn't say Peter Parker. She said Spider-Man. Anyway, she might not have meant that. Anyway.
And now even more. I mean, the centaurs used to be the trainers of heroes, and now I train children. It is my spirit animal. I am a centaur. Except it'd be weird for a Patronus because usually those just come out and sort of dance around. Mine would come out and like make a speech.
Is that
be gone, ye tormentor, or augmentor? What are those called? The Dementors. That's what it is. And with that segue, we're going to give it to Thomas.
No, what if the conclusion of today's talk was actually that the Patronus quiz was the perfect personality measure?
I think I was like some kind of sad bird, like a pigeon or something.
It just comes out, and that's what saves you.
Yeah.
AJ, if you log into Pottermore, because I know you have an account on it, you can take your Patronus quiz. I will not judge you if you are doing that right now. Maybe I'll judge you a little bit.
Doing it in 3.
There it is.
2. What was it? Pottermore?
Pottermore. Don't pretend like you don't know. Okay, so today we're going to be talking, first off, Happy New Year. I believe
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. This is January 1, 2019. That's weird. This is what is going to kick off 3 months of me writing down the wrong year on any time that I'm writing down the date. So get excited for that. Today we're going to be talking about personality broadly. And we, as with many of my topics, we'll start by understanding kind of the modern conceptions of it, and then we'll move into what is hopefully a more classical and potentially more helpful way of thinking through personality.
I'm pumped.
I hope so. This is,
as the British say, I'm chuffed.
I'm trying to take my Patronus quiz.
I'm so sorry. Are we interrupting your Pottermore quiz?
It makes noise, apparently.
I mean, It does. Yeah.
Oh,
Here's
when
what
you
we'll
when you
do.
roll the cursor over the close button, it makes noise. Ready? Listen.
So Hamburg, here, I'll make you a deal. We'll do our Pottermore quiz, and then we'll reveal it on the next podcast.
Okay, sounds like a deal.
All right,
I'll
listeners.
close that for now.
No, it was perfect.
is
You
what
could have
is
just
known-
muted it. That was the other option.
But I'm not sure how that works with our recording audio. Like if I
that's
mute my
terrifying.
audio here, we might lose audio.
If you play audio on your
altogether.
computer, does it just go right into the sound file?
No, it's actually looping through the microphone into
Back to the computer.
this. It's like different systems, but I'm not sure on what level they interact. The listeners don't need to know
That's
this.
what I'm saying. I'm hoping that the listener didn't hear a thing and they're just like, what
What
are
is
these three?
happening?
Yeah. Are we just having a shared hallucination right
If
now?
you guys heard it, the listener heard it.
Oh, never mind.
All right, Megby. So are you a INTJ?
There it is. Great. So we
are
will
you?
start off by talking about Meyers-Briggs. So for anyone who doesn't know, I will sometimes call it MBTI. That's the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It is a very popular form of personality measure. It is, much like the name MBTI, it's made up of 4 letters, and those 4 letters are, the first is either extroversion, E, or introversion, I. And I'll be reading, this is off of the Myers-Briggs Foundation website. They provide kind of the shortest summary possible for what these different letters mean. So I'll just go through a little bit of what the test is itself. We'll talk about its history, and then we'll bash on it just for fun because we're mean. So Myers-Briggs Foundation, the way you determine whether you're extroverted or introverted is to say, do you prefer to focus on the outer world or on your own inner world? So outer world is extroversion, on your own inner world is introversion. So boys, hearing that, would you identify primarily as an extrovert or an introvert?
Introvert.
Introvert?
I don't know.
Really?
You like going camping?
Oh, it should be introvert.
Yeah, but I like going camping with people.
No.
So then extrovert.
So whenever I take the Myers-Briggs test,
Hogwash.
I am right on the border.
I am too, actually.
I'm like 3% towards extroverted.
Okay.
And I feel like it's garbage because whenever you do the test, it's like, here are 5 people you're like. You are like Gandhi, Stalin, Paul McCartney, and St. Paul. You're like, what? None of those people, how are you those the same personalities?
So I always call a little bit of hogwash on this one because my students tell me it's not what you like, or it's how you recharge. And I was like, everyone needs time alone. Like
Everyone.
almost everyone I've ever met, they reach a threshold where they have to like take a little time alone to recharge.
Yep.
And
Yeah, you all are getting to some of the tension in the Myers-Briggs test. Let's come back to that after we go through. Let's describe it and then talk about why it sucks. Okay? Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So the second category is on information. Do you prefer to focus on the basic information you take in, or do you prefer to interpret and add meaning? So if you
that is the dumbest question I've
focus
ever
on the
heard.
basic information, you're sensing. If you prefer to interpret and add meaning, that's intuitive, which is an N for the second letter of the word intuitive. Anyway.
Doesn't anyone who reads philosophy know that like the only way we can take in information is by
But
interpretation?
you know some people who are like, I want data points. I only want to look at spreadsheets.
They're interpreting.
No,
You
they
gotta
are
interpret
sensing
those.
purely. Anyway, the third category is decisions. When making decisions, do you prefer to first look at logic and consistency, or first look at the people and special circumstances? If you prefer to look at logic and consistency, that is thinking, which is a T. And if you first look at the people and special circumstances, that is feeling, F. Are you all more thinkers or feelers?
I always like, I'm straddling this one too. Because there's a lot of feelings inside.
Oh,
I think I'm hard thinking.
hard. Okay.
Yeah.
And then finally, for structure, in dealing with the outside world, do you prefer to get things decided, or do you prefer to stay open to new information and options? If you prefer to get things decided, that's judging. And if you prefer to stay open to new things and options, that's perceiving. Would you identify as judging or perceiving?
I am more a perceiver. I like
I'm a perceiver as well.
INFP. Inf.
Okay, so now that we have
I'm
identified...
an ENTP.
Okay,
ENTP.
let's go INFP.
Like a walking tree.
Yeah, I'm ENTP.
I don't like that at all. INFP... Graham, you are...
It's just maple syrup.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that just sap or something?
It's like in blood, isn't it? Anyway. So, INFP, that means, Graham, you are deep felt, quietly caring, compassionate, pursues meaning and
Sounds
harmony. Okay. AJ, what is yours?
ENTP.
ENTP.
And for the record, every time I've read a description of an ENTP, they have me absolutely nailed to the wall. Like that, it is. Yeah, I've never read one and been like, "That's not me." Every time, it's 100% me.
So you're energetic and inventive and enthusiastic, abstract, logical, novelty-seeking, adaptable. So now that we've identified your perfect personality, let's talk a little bit about where this. Well, you all are getting at. Let's talk about where it comes from first. So the test is named Meyers-Briggs. Does anyone want to guess who came up with this?
Advertisers.
Okay, well, you're not entirely wrong, but no, literally, the name is Meyers-Briggs. Where did this name come from?
Oscar Mayer.
Oscar Mayer.
Hot dogs. And the Brig. Oscar Mayer spent some time in a jail. And
Buffy Briggs broke him out.
What is...
Buffy Briggs.
Buffy Briggs is a really strong thief that broke Oscar Mayer out of jail.
Sounds
I swear
legit
you
to
make
me.
up all the things that you say. Okay, so Myers-Briggs was put together by two people. One,
Buffy Briggs.
so
Why does he talk like an old-timey boxer or gangster?
Fisticuffs.
So
Put him up, see?
just literally what's
You
happening.
carpetbagger.
This makes no what? Okay, so
You feeler.
I am redirecting. So the test was put together by these two people, Catherine Cook Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers. So Briggs and Myers-Briggs.
Wait, two Briggses. It sounded like there was
They
some
are related.
sisters?
No. Catherine Cook Briggs is the mother, and her daughter is Isabel Briggs Myers.
Wow.
So these two
daughter.
people who came up with what is ostensibly so just to add, you might be wondering why we're talking about the Myers-Briggs as a starting point. Used by 89 of the Fortune 100 companies. It's used by the U.S. government. It's used by hundreds of universities. And this is from a wonderful... I need to find the link. Anyway, there's a great article about Myers-Briggs, and I'll try and pull it up by the end as a classical thing I got wrong for not knowing the name. Anyway, it's also used by online dating sites to pair people together. The field of psychometric testing, of which Myers-Briggs is the largest, is a $500 million industry. There are many tests given every year. Anyway, these two people who came up with the most popular of the psychometric tests, the most popular of the personality tests, what do you think their credentials were? What do you think their background was that prepared them to be able to put together? Do you already know this story, actually?
I do not. I'm going to guess that they were
Gardeners.
Okay. But
scientists.
right, wouldn't
Scientists,
you guess think-
gardeners.
They were-
They were botanists.
They were.
Okay.
Yes.
So they studied plants, which prepared them to study humans?
Well, personality. You learn a lot from a plant.
Plants don't have personality.
Say that to a Venus flytrap.
To all you Venus flytraps listening, you don't have a personality.
They get a little bit snippy.
It hurts.
They can give biting remarks.
I'm so upset right now. Okay, so these two people, what else?
They fly.
This is so upsetting. What other things would you expect of these two people, Myers and Briggs? What would you expect them to know if they're putting together this personality test?
Psychology.
Psychology, right? Background in psychology.
Were like
Freud's
young friends.
Freud's friends. So like buddies with him. They are...
His secretaries. I don't know.
Oh, so some kind of close connection with him. Secretary feels almost too disconnected from like...
No, then his research assistants.
They did all the clerical work while Freud was hobnobbing at parties.
That's fair. So they did the actual work. Yeah. So Freud stole credit from them. So actually, they're a mother and daughter
Classic Freud.
pair to not do any work and be hobnobbing. Is that his style? I don't know anything about it. So the origin of the story is that this mother and daughter pair, so that is the mother and daughter pair, I guess the mother who is older, so Catherine Cook Briggs, while raising her daughter Isabel, was making observations, just writing things down every day as to, how her daughter was acting, what she noticed about the personality, what she noticed about the traits of her daughter. And she would eventually publish this. So for 13 years, she wrote down daily observations about her kid, and then she published that under a pseudonym, thankfully. But
I was going to say, that feels like having your mom post all your baby pictures on Facebook and having them never go away.
But almost worse.
Well, way worse.
Narrate your actions.
Yeah. So from birth until 13, the mom Catherine kept this diary.
13, the perfect year for children to have an expose on their actions come out to the world.
Sounds awful. Thankfully, it was titled "The Life of Suzanne." It was not actually named "The Life of Isabel," which was the daughter's actual name. Anyway, Catherine had read a book by Carl Jung, so that is spot on for having a reference there. So Carl Jung talked about these different archetypes, and his understanding of archetype is not you all will probably have more to say about this than I do, but it's not to say that this is how people actually act, but these are the ways that stories are told over long periods of time, and that there are heroes that exemplify these different traits.
And that those stories are pretty universally known,
Yes.
or are hardwired into
Yes.
the human, I would say soul, Young would probably say psyche.
Yeah, exactly. And even if there are different details to those stories, we recognize all of them. So that is what Jung meant when he talked about archetypes.
Are we going to talk about Star Wars?
Do you know?
Oh, it's Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Oh,
Jungian
we already did that
archetypes.
one.
Oh, that's true.
Which is a great episode to go back and listen to it. So Jung wrote this book, and then Catherine read it, and she loved it. And so then Catherine wrote to Jung and said, hey, what if we took this and used it to understand for child raising? Like, what if we applied your archetypes to parenting? So Catherine writes this letter to Jung. Jung writes back, let me get the quote. Jung rebuked her for overstepping her bounds as a dispassionate observer. You overdid it, he wrote. You wanted to help, which is an encroachment upon the will of others. Your attitude ought to be that of one who offers an opportunity that can be taken or rejected. Otherwise, you are most likely to get in trouble. It is so because man is not fundamentally good. Almost half of him is a devil. So the guy who actually came up with the archetypes that Catherine was applying didn't like the idea of what she was doing, didn't like the archetypes being applied to personality, understanding personality.
Did he give a reason as opposed to just a rebuke?
In saying that she overdid it. In saying that... So as opposed to just using this to understand people, what Catherine was wanting to do...
Was more deterministic? Like, you are this kind of person?
Yes, that. And then also to raise her children in that way. Instead of being a dispassionate observer, actually like engaging in the situation.
So this is
God forbid she raise her children.
Yes, I mean, exactly.
This is kind of like the area of 19th century science that I find really fascinating, and I haven't done a ton of research on, but I'm just sort of starting to kind of piece these things together, is this move towards classification and labeling of psychology. So, psychology bursts on the scene with Jung and Freud, and then you get this move to doing like your sort of classical biological classification of, oh, you are a INTJ, this is going to explain things. Just like how we can say this is a chrysanthemum that comes from this line of chrysanthemums and that can tell us what this flower is going to do. We have this move to be doing that to different kinds of human beings. And you see that play itself out in all sorts of different aspects. So you're moving people away from just actions, from verbs to nouns.
Sure.
You are now an X, as opposed to this person has done Y. It's this person is now an X and the X person does Y. That move, I feel like, is a really big shift that we don't think too much about. The one that not to get too controversial, but the one that that got me thinking about this was the move from talking about different sort of taboo sexual acts, like sort of the old sodomy laws of England, to labeling of hetero and homosexual. Like the idea of heterosexuality and homosexuality are labels that are coming out of this 19th century movement of wanting to classify and pathologize behavior. And in the classical world, they didn't label human beings. Everybody was a man. Everybody was a human. But there was actions that you did, but they didn't pathologize them, or they didn't give labels to it that you were an X.
But that's not entirely
you did
fair.
A Y.
There are types, the sanguine.
Yes, but those are less
different.
deterministic. I think
we'll get to the temperaments at the end, but there are some differences between how the temperaments understand personality and how Meyers-Briggs does.
But I would say the deterministic was there, but in the form of, for any lack of a better word, your sign. Being born under the sign of Mercury would make you mercurial. It is deterministic. You were born under this particular situation in the heavens, therefore you act a certain way.
It wasn't deterministic, it was influential.
And again...
Yes, you are influenced to be a certain way. You can counteract it with, I think it was, wisdom and effort?
Yes.
And the goal was to overcome it.
And the goal was to overcome it. I think that's the huge difference.
It wasn't a license to sort of fall into it.
Correct.
It was identifying it and then counteracting it.
You had a tendency, but if you gave too much into that tendency, that was ignoble. That was not a good way to live.
Dang, maybe this is awesome. Keep going.
Yeah, I hope so. So just all to say on Meyers-Briggs, so that what Meyers-Briggs I'll briefly cover problems because you already said them. What does Meyers-Briggs aim to do? Meyers-Briggs aims to put you into one of 16 categories and say you are this thing. The
Just like Gandhi and Stalin and Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
You and John Lennon or not Lennon. Lennon McCartney can't be the same one.
Jackson Pollock.
There you go. But
JFK.
yeah, so the goal is to put you into one of these mutually exclusive categories. The ideology behind it says that you are a certain personality, that it does not change over time. They usually recommend a test the earliest test to be taken somewhere around 13, because that's when your personality is solidified, which also is not true.
It's definitely not
true. So
I'm the same guy now that I was at 13.
Yeah,
I hope
someone
not.
who teaches someone who teaches like in high school to think of the 9th graders and then think of them as 12th graders, not true.
So some people do push back and say that there are tendencies that are the same between childhood and now, but to say that we are the same person is terrifying and I hope not true. And part of why we're talking about this on January 1st, that if you have thought about doing some sort of New Year's resolution, just because you've been a certain way the previous year does not mean you need to be that same way this next year.
There should be only one thing you resolve to do.
Which is?
Virtue.
Oh, I thought you were going to say vote.
Oh.
You started with a V, and I thought you were going with vote on that one.
I thought you subscribed to classical stuff. I thought that was the only resolution that was necessary.
That's step one.
Like and subscribe.
Are we a YouTube channel now? So goal is to
classical stuff does Twitch. We're gonna play, boys.
Not me anymore. Sorry, I have never played Fortnite.
Neither have I.
I died almost instantly both times.
This makes me sad. So
I just want to dance.
I'm so sad for all of you right now. So yes,
I heard there's a game mode. Sorry, Thomas.
This is so
I heard
exciting.
there's a game mode where the goal is to dance on the enemy's dance floor for as long as you possibly can. So you have to like kill everybody and then go dance on their dance floor.
That's just really smart.
I feel like that's super fun.
Anyway, sorry, Tommy.
Anyway, one of 16 categories. A second problem that you are getting at is that the Meyers-Briggs is aiming to to differentiate between these two poles. So first off, there's an assumption in it that extroversion is the opposite of introversion, which is not necessarily true. So is it possible to conceive of someone who is both extroverted when around people and also loves solitude?
For sure.
So are they
Fiercely
separate things?
solitude when they have their alone time, like they protect it, and then when they're with people, they're really gregarious.
Which probably
Like Jesus.
Or Twain, it sounds like.
Oh, we should. Oh, I'll come back to that. AJ, maybe your comment is pointing to you being having some. You have both of these traits. You are not only extroverted or only introverted. You have some of both. Is that what you're?
I think
getting at?
that's fair.
Yep. So there's an assumption that these things are poles of each other, and then also by only giving yourself a letter, you are equating someone who on a test scores 51% extroverted and 100% extroverted. You're saying they're both the same for being extroverted, which is a silly thing to say. So those are all things that are great about the Myers-Briggs. I won't go into it here.
But it's not. Is it useful enough that if all of these people are using it, it must be a mental model that carries some kind of some sort of freight for dealing with human beings.
Sure. So why is Myers-Briggs popular if it's actually really bad? So part of the reason Myers-Briggs is used at all is because an executive coach got hold of this model that Myers and Briggs put together, and then she sold that to CEOs. So there was no research, there was no testing of the model before it was being used in a corporate setting. Okay, so why did employers like it? Because people are really complicated.
Yeah.
And if you can boil people down to these 16 things and say, identify what personality is, put them in a job that's appropriate to that personality, that's way easier than actually having to get to know people.
It's true.
And then
Introverted thinking, perceiving. That's an accountant.
and just move them down the assembly line, put them into the right spot.
Extroverted, sales.
Treat them as widgets, put them in the right spot, and just go. In that sense, that's a piece of why Myers-Briggs is popular. I think a second piece is that I forget who was joking about this earlier, but all the goofy personality tests that exist on Facebook, why do we take those? Because we like to know about ourselves.
It's true.
Right? We like to think about ourselves. And so if this gives us some insight into who we are, we want to do that.
I think it also goes further than that. I think we are often mysteries to ourselves. We want one thing and don't necessarily do it, and we don't see why we can't do the thing we want to do. I mean, St. Paul would have said sin, right? But I don't know. I think having someone else resolve your personality tension and anxiety for you is a relief.
Yeah.
Like being able to say, I am an ENTP and that's what I am and that's how I should cater to myself is a lot easier than saying I'm really complex and the things that I do sometimes scare and baffle me and I don't want to, nobody wants to live there. Right. And so finding
it's a heavy load for BuzzFeed to bear.
To create these personality types.
It is.
Yes. So
answer these questions about food and we'll tell you
your deepest innermost desires.
Yeah.
But we do want that.
Your deep innermost desires are for a burrito.
But part of it is that for a burrito, that's my deepest desire. Part of it is that I list this as a weakness of the personality measures is that they flatten our language, but that's also a strength of it, is that we are complicated creatures and we're looking for simple solutions to complicated things. Mm-hmm. And so if someone can just tell you, this is who you are and this is why you've experienced all the problems you have, there's something comforting in that.
I still can't get over the over-nouning of human beings.
Let's follow with that. That's actually, so another side of it, Myers-Briggs, I wouldn't say it's pathologizing anything because it makes a statement that all 16 types, there's no better or worse type. So all the types are good. I guess neutral maybe is the better way to put that. This is somewhat more complicated in a different personality assessment, which is called the Big Five. So since Myers-Briggs has lots of problems, I'm not going into the details of it, but Myers-Briggs also fails on some fun things like reliability, which is just the property of when you take the test multiple times, you get the same results over time. That is not true of Myers-Briggs. So that's why it's not largely used in social sciences other than to study Myers-Briggs itself. So anyway, so the assessment that is used more.
That's how you get tenure.
Yeah, you like that?
You invent a test, you make it popular, and then you develop a whole department studying the test.
Yeah, but that's what I just love that it was. Anyway, there's people who didn't have tenure. Like the story is often told that the Myers and Briggs were like in their basement putting together this model. Anyway, so the one that's more popularly used in social psychology is called the Big Five personality assessment. And the Big Five, you can remember with the acronym OCEAN, OCEAN. O is for openness to experience. C, how does ocean spell? That's embarrassing. C is for conscientiousness. E is for extroversion. A is for agreeableness. And N is for neuroticism. Yeah, you like that one?
Yeah, I feel like one of those things is not like the other.
So, yeah, fun. So neuroticism sometimes gets inversed. So the inverse of neuroticism is emotional stability. It messes up the acronym, but there's probably a different acronym for that. But again, the goal
OCA.
What's that?
Well, it's with the E.
Oh, yeah, at the end. So
the newest fragrance from Dior.
That's what it kind of sounds like. So the
water is the essence of moisture.
Moisture is the essence of wetness.
Happy New Year, everyone. Okay, so the Big Five, same as Myers-Briggs, wants to have this assumption that there are no better or worse personalities. Mm-hmm. So is there one of those five that you
neuroticism sounds way worse.
Yeah, so the modern versions of the Big Five have these like subcategories beneath them, and neuroticism is made up of the two subcategories, anxiety and depression. And I just think it's absurd to make the statement that those are not moral categories. Like
those are just
just traits, and you have them, and you are them, and you are either anxious or not anxious, and you're always going to be that way. And this gets back to your classification thing. But that's also the goal of it is to classify people. So it accomplishes that.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. So it will classify you, but then it tells you some like really subtle lies in there, and that's what I was just getting at. Of you'll always be this way, you'll never change. And you should just kind of get used to your personality and not try and be something you're not.
Or even worse, others have to just deal with it.
Yes. Oh, I think that's a great one. Mm-hmm. That, we can't do anything about the people around us. This is kind of a bummer. So that gets us to some place of the modern personality assessments. You had mentioned this before, and I just thought it was funny. Let me see. This is a quote from a blog, and it's potentially the dumbest thing I've read in my life. Jesus had preferences for INFJ, or perhaps INTJ, INFP, or INTP. This might explain why he stood out like a sore thumb.
Aww.
Because he was one of like 6 different possible types?
Well, or that it was his personality type that led to him standing out.
You got him crucified.
Yeah,
I'd say a more important element of his personality is godhood.
His divinity. Yeah. I feel like that has a little bit more to do with it. Anyway, I just thought that was really
If I was divine, I don't know how you test for that.
Again,
are you God incarnate? Yeah. Yes. Extreme yes. Uncertain no. Or extreme no.
So is that E or I?
So this blog post, yeah, seriously,
immortal or eternal.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like if you say that Jesus has a specific kind of personality, everyone's going to say, all right, well then his personality is the best personality.
Right.
When reality is this is
we can't all be God.
When you start classifying and turning people into, when you start nouning verbs, I feel like you just it's really dehumanizing.
Say why?
Because you are taking the brotherhood of man and then putting them into categories and saying that they are gated communities of no currency, right? Like if you are this kind of person, you will always be this kind of person, and here's the kinds of things that will make you happy, or here's the kinds of ways that you need to exist in the world, and any other permutation of those ways is, not going to be good. And it doesn't, so like, here's maybe a man that you admire. Well, he's a different personality than you, so you are never going to be like Pericles, or you are never going to be like Jesus, or you're never going, because of your personality, you're just never going to be that way because you don't have that personality, try as you might. So I feel like it takes away so much potential, so much agency, and it is a huge barrier for like development, for people to become virtuous.
Yes, but do the test get at something of people are different from each other?
Yes. So
no, I'm going to go with no.
Yeah,
we're actually all the same. I'll take the other side, and then you're going to correct me. So to say that we are, I think you said this at the beginning, someone said this at the beginning, that the classical conception is that we are man or we are woman, and then we go from there, right? But there's more complexity to it. Like to say that the only difference between us is our gender is not true.
It is the rush to precision. That's the thing.
That's fair.
You can make general claims, but it gets more absurd the further down you go. I mean, it's kind of like chemistry, right? Like, you know how a chemical reaction is going to go, but the further down you go to subatomic particles, you have sort of chaos and unpredictability. And I kind of feel like it's sort of analogous to talking about individual people, right? Like, you can generally make claims about what groups of people are going to do or what different temperaments are going to do, but but when you try to get more and more and more specific and more surgical and precise in your pronouncements and in your, it's going to be, you're going to get to these absurdities. It's like that. And so then you're going to fall in love with your model and then demand people to fit it.
Yes.
At some point.
No, that's fair. That's totally spot on. So let's, I get, just as an aside, there's a fun Quora. You all have used Quora before, where someone asks a question and then anyone can reply with an answer. There's this fun thread asking what is Jesus's personality type, and the majority of responses say something to the effect of, I think he's this, much like me. And it's just, this is one of your points of like, we will then ascribe to our heroes what our personality is because we want to be the heroes, which is interesting and funny. Okay, so what we have, this is our successful takedown. Did I mention that Isabel, the daughter, wrote mystery novels? That was her thing that she did. Did I say that?
Anyway, nope, that's fun.
Okay. So yes, all these tests are ignoring a morality to them to say that all of them are the exact same and they're all fine and you should just be the way that you are. Okay. Let's talk then. You all, I told you all beforehand that we were going to get to the 4 temperaments. So let's start with that. So there are 4 of them. Do we want to do a quiz show and name them off?
We know them all.
Sanguine,
phlegmatic,
choleric, phlegmatic,
melancholy.
Yeah. So what are these 4 temperaments? Can you describe anything about them?
One, you're a fish person.
Well, that one's my favorite. Let's do that last. So sanguine is like, it has to do with an excess of the humors. So I think sanguine is an excess of
fire,
blood, right? So you're kind of...
Oh. That's sorry, not
because it's literally the word.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like the town blacksmith, right? You got ruddy red cheeks. You're real happy and jolly, but you got a temper.
Yeah.
That's sanguine. Choleric. We now think of
choleric, flying off the handle. I think you have an excess of bile.
Yeah, I think it's
bile, yellow bile.
It's either black or yellow bile.
It's yellow.
Yeah. It's yellow bile. Yeah. So you are you do not want to be choleric. You are angry. This is often depicted by a guy dragging his wife by the hair. He beats people. He's evil, associated with lightning and fire. Like just generally a bad dude. It's rough.
Isn't he rashy? Like his skin is inflamed with rashes.
I don't know, maybe. Oh. And then black bile, I think it is.
Or melancholy.
Melancholy.
Yep.
And melancholy is a little bit different now. Now it's kind of like depressed.
Sad.
Yeah. Back then it was a little bit different, but I'm spacing on how.
Wasn't it like quiet and going off by yourself and like more saturnine, like thinking about the end of the world and thinking about
thoughtful, but not necessarily in a depressed way, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, but still kind of that sadness.
Tended towards depressant. And then my favorite, phlegmatic, basically you are a human sponge person. Like you are disappointing to family, to teachers. You are not ambitious. Fish. You dream about wet, clammy things like fish. You're generally kind of sweaty and usually kind of clammy and flabby. And just a useless person is what phlegmatic. Think phlegm and then personify it.
Yeah. So
phlegmatic, like phlegm.
Phlegman.
Yeah.
Phlegman.
Phlegm person.
Worst Avenger.
So apathy might be another helpful word to think about for phlegmatic. Okay.
Yeah.
So AJ, you started off earlier in the podcast talking about how when you are born is tied to each of these. Does anyone want to take a swing at the seasons that are tied to each of these?
So sanguine is summer.
No.
Spring?
Yes.
I think summer is choleric, isn't it?
Oh, summer's choleric.
Phlegmatic, I'm going to go with winter.
Absolutely. Which
And
leaves
then
melancholy
is fall.
That makes sense.
You get a little moony.
You think about the
fall.
end, the cold's coming, you're looking back.
And then when winter's there, you have a cold.
You're
corking stuff up. That sounds phlegmatic.
You're just wrapping blankets.
And there's also a time of day associated with each as well.
Like there's 6 hours of the day.
I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah, there's actually they talk about it.
6 a.m. to noon is sanguine. Noon to I can't remember.
Yeah, I think 6 a.m. to noon is sanguine. I think midday is choleric,
midday,
and then evening is melancholy,
and night is
phlegmatic, I think. And that's why they talk to Brutus when he's walking around in his orchard, and his wife's like, dude, you are tempting the Rumi. Like, this is not the time to be outside. It's the phlegmatic time.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to make yourself sick.
That's when the witches hang out, too.
Yeah.
This is terrifying. Okay, so, and there's a piece of it, we've said this already, but these 4 humors, so they act out in that there are certain behaviors tied to each of those. But what is the origin of those behaviors?
What do you mean?
So if I'm sanguine, if I'm overly sanguine, why am I overly sanguine?
It's a bodily situation. You have too much of something in your body, and that is causing you to act weird.
Have an imbalance.
Imbalance of the humors.
That's this is great. So this is what we were getting at before, is that different people will have different bents, and at some level, if it's tied to the physical, you're saying my liver works differently, my spleen, my brain, my whatever works differently from other people, which is true. There are similarities between all of us in that we have livers, gallbladders, spleens, brains, but they work differently, right? So to say that there is a tendency in each of us, but if you are overly optimistic all the time, so overly sanguine, that's not viewed as a difference, that's viewed as an excess, that's viewed as a problem of some kind. So take the next step of this.
You could be foolhardy.
Yes. But also you could also be too unenthusiastic. So there's a negative side of it also. You don't have enough blood. You don't have enough. Your liver is underperforming from what it should be.
So the desire is for balance. The desire is for having the 4 humors to be working together.
Yeah.
For health.
And that's the main point to get to in talking about the 4 humors, the 4 temperaments, you'll hear it either way, is to say that the goal of them was to have the whole body working in perfect harmony, which would create a balance between these 4 forces. So let me just read the positive aspects of them.
You would have the ideal type. You would have the person you're supposed to be.
Yeah. But let me just read kind of some adjectives tied to each of these. So on the sanguine personality, this is I'm just saying this now to summarize what you all were saying before. Talkative, so sanguine, talkative, enthusiastic, active, social. Choleric, independent, decisive, goal-oriented. Melancholic, detail-oriented, deep thinking, feeling. Phlegmatic, relaxed, peaceful, quiet, easygoing. Can you think of someone who you don't... Are there any of those traits that you're like, we really don't want those?
No, of course not.
Because they all have positive aspects to
them. Yes, they all have positive
Mm-hmm.
aspects to it. You want to have... You got some phlegm in there.
Yes. Even though...
Otherwise, you can't chew.
Yeah.
Yes. Gross. That's also... Yes. Whenever I go through these and read about like the biles, I'm like, oh, this is disgusting. But all these things are necessary to a fully functioning body as well, right?
Well, with their rudimentary understanding of the body.
Oh, this is fair. Sorry. So am I saying that literally these 4 things tie to the personality traits? No. Though, to be fair, if you are overly enthusiastic and someone takes blood out of you, you will be less enthusiastic, right? Like there is a truth to it.
That'll knock you down a couple of pegs.
And that's, people often will make fun
if
of...
I got to drink yellow bile, I'm going to be mad.
Yeah, seriously. Like, yes. See, it's going to work.
Yeah.
So,
or if you're bilious or if your spleen isn't working right, you're probably going to be a little bit grumpy.
Yeah, and I wouldn't blame you.
Yeah.
So Aristotle often gets made fun of for having bad biology, but are we talking about the literal body, or is there some like deeper truth to it of our personality being tied to our body in a close way? I went into more detail on this in my summer conference talks, so sorry I'm breezing over this here. But when we do these personality tests, we dissociate ourselves from ourselves. We say that here are these personality types of how I think I am, but it has nothing to do with my body or with myself. That's what Graham is saying when he says that do you remember the exact phrase you says? It dehumanizes. Yes. Yeah. And that's what it's doing. It's saying that I'm a bundle of behaviors or ideas. I'm not actually a person.
Or if you are separating it from your body, at some level, it's kind of Gnostic. That you've got some sort of secret way of existing deep inside, and you're sort of spinning or extrapolating or abstracting that from your actual body.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a separation between. It's thinking that you are something secret and separate from your body in its entirety and can be separately analyzed. And as a personal pet peeve, I just to share with you boys, I really don't like the word dehumanize.
Why?
I think it has been beaten to death and used in circumstances where it doesn't apply, right?
That's probably fair.
We have armies. Are armies dehumanizing?
We have armies. Why? What?
So I often hear the word dehumanize used in a context where someone is regarded, I mean, I don't want to say fully as an asset, but as like, if I put numbers to my army and say I can spend 300 men at this particular place, is that dehumanizing?
I mean, yes and
I would say as a general, no, but I still have to do it, right? That's still a measure that I have to take. If someone insults me, is that dehumanizing?
Maybe.
No, I think it is treating me as a human. I think the moment they sell me as a slave or check my teeth for problems, I think that is dehumanizing.
I think if there's a dignity to humans and you disrespect that dignity, dehumanizing is not the first word I would use, but I think it is. I think this is my problem with it, is not necessarily that it's always misapplied. I think it is more widely applied than it should be, and I think it's lazy language.
Or we live in very dehumanizing times.
Or the term is right.
And the term is correct.
I actually think our time is far less dehumanizing than almost any other that has ever existed.
I disagree.
What are the movements right now? The movements are for human equity.
No, they're for like spreadsheets and number crunching.
I think I'm going to ask that we table this because it sounds like a fruitful discussion, probably for another episode focused more on that.
Oh, we're going to forget it though.
Yeah, that's the other goal. So just kidding. Sorry. In my leadership class, whenever my students go off topic, I say, okay, we're going to put that in the parking lot. And so I keep a list of the parking lot, but we also very rarely go back to the parking lot. Anyway, here we are.
This conversation.
Sorry. So the only other comment to make on the temperaments is that they are tied to the age of a person as well. And all I'm saying with that is that there are things that are going to be easier for you, first off, based on your own biology, how you're born. Some people are born, the modern term for it is a happiness set point. The hedonic treadmill is another idea tied to this. But some people are born happier than other people. Some people are born less happy than other people. Some people are born more aggressive than other people. Pick any of those things, any of these personality traits. Does anyone want to push back or disagree on that one?
Nah.
Okay.
No. But I mean,
you got happy babies and you got angry babies.
Sure.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
But the average baby, we would say, would I actually say this? The average baby is kind of just like happy. Like everything's, anyway.
Nah.
Oh, really?
There are some that cry out, just have problems all the time.
I wasn't going to shoot holes in this, but tied into the ages, the sanguine temperament is tied in with infancy. The choleric is tied in with youth. So again, that's the aggressive, angry is tied in with youth. The melancholic is tied in with adulthood. So again, that kind of getting away, kind of sadness. We wanted to move away from that term. Analytical and detail-oriented, deep thinking is associated with adulthood, which leaves then the phlegmatic for old age. So apathetic behavior, which is a bummer. But just to say that there are probably strengths that you have based on how you're born and your age, but then there are weaknesses tied with each of those as well. And so there's a wisdom in maintaining whatever that enthusiasm that there is and everything being new in infancy, maintaining that into youth, into adulthood, into old age. There is a wisdom in not giving into the pure aggression of youth, but also, again, keeping that excitement alive, keeping that like deep thought alive. So,
or the strong the youth's strong sense of fairness.
yeah, sure. And getting really worked up about that. Yeah. So again, goal here is a balance between all of these. Some of them will come easier to you, but that doesn't mean that because it's easier to you, it's like right or good or better. Is that okay? Okay. So I
like the idea of that, temperament's appropriate with age.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there are temperaments that I feel are inappropriate to men of our, age of mid 30s to early 30s.
Yes.
You're 30 now. You're almost 30.
I'm 29.
You're
yeah,
29.
I turned 30 in May.
There are temperaments that are more appropriate to that age that were less appropriate when we were 15.
No, that's great. Yeah.
And then I don't really know I haven't really thought about how that, are there temperaments now that would also be inappropriate when we were 60? I guess if we were ambitious for our careers at 60, kind of like King Lear, there's something like,
Bro, give it up.
Yeah. There's something off-putting about that. But if you're sort of phlegmatic and unambitious when you're 21, there's also something like this is the prime of your life. You need to go and make something of yourself.
No, and I think that's a great point that even what those different traits look like at different ages will be different.
I'm thinking of the movie The Graduate, right? Where what's his name? Dustin Hoffman is at the dinner party and
Going to plastics.
The future is plastics, and he's like, I just don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
And then he has the boomer fantasy of destroying the middle class existence and running away in a romantic gesture, and then realizing that it was a big bummer.
Yeah. I
got lots of feelings about the movie The Graduate. Anyway, keep going.
That you love it so much.
I hate that movie.
Okay, so I was not planning on talking about this, and it's not purely classical, so you all might hate this, and we can go with that. Let's talk briefly about the totally hokey but totally fun to talk about Enneagram.
Yay!
Okay, so this
is Catholic stuff you should know.
That's awesome.
Well,
is it Catholic?
I
heard a lot of
this is what's complicated. Okay, this
Protestant
is
churches.
Let's add to more of our complications. So,
bring it.
First off, what is the Enneagram?
The Enneagram are 9 personality types, if you want to call it that way. No, they're sort of like 9 behavior types associated with a number, and they have. That's all I know.
Okay, so just starting with the word itself, Enneagram is 9 points or like 9-sided shape. Like anyway, that's what Enneagram literally means. And so if you Google Enneagram, you might be worried that you're looking at a pentagram. I promise it's not. It's a shape. That's all it is. So Enneagram, this is what Graham just said. Whoa. The Enneagram. Wow,
this is
sorry.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's a shape with 9 points. Those 9 points represent different kind of sets of traits or attributes. Sometimes you'll hear it described as a thing that is old or classical or whatever. What they mean by that is that the ideas behind the Enneagram, some people say, come from Evagrius, one of the Desert Fathers. We talked about him on the Acedia episode, if you want to go back to that. Cool. So Evagrius came up with these 8 deadly thoughts. And then Thomas Aquinas, who was obsessed with the number 7, eventually adapted those 8 into 7, and that he combined 2 of them into acedia or sloth. So it was both a laziness and then also like a despair over spiritual things got combined into acedia.
Pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, anger, sloth.
Proud of you. So those are the 7. Okay, so then where the Enneagram actually comes from is that there was a dude who was writing stuff about personality in the 1920s. It was then adapted by another dude in the 1950s and then was largely rediscovered in the 1990s. In my reading of it, it was largely popularized by Father Richard Rohr, if anyone's heard that name before. And then it has recently kind of come into more knowledge with Suzanne Stabile's Road Back to You, if anyone's read that. It's a good book. So what is this? Why am I talking about this on a classical podcast? First, there are these ties to... Again, each of these types are tied to one of those 8 deadly thoughts. And so what the Enneagram does differently from other personality tests is that it doesn't treat your personality as an amoral thing that you just are. It treats it as a descriptor of, yes, the differences between people, but doesn't let anyone say that they are perfect. There are weaknesses in each of these 9 different types. So there's that.
And aren't there, when you are under pressure, these kinds of personalities come out. When you are at peace, these kinds of personalities come out. This is the way that number threes go bad, this is the way that number threes can be useful.
Yep.
Doesn't the Enneagram kind of
So
talk about that
another
kind of thing?
another thing that the Enneagram does that other personality types don't is that it recognizes that people change under different situations. So this is a weakness, I think, of Meyers-Briggs and Big Five, is that it says you are this thing and you're only that thing. Whereas what the Enneagram offers is some flexibility in saying that most of the time you're probably this, but if you were in a really tough situation, you would be different in this way. And if you were in a good situation, you would be this way. And I think that's a helpful way to understand our personalities. We're not the same all the time. We're not consistent moment to moment. So there's that. I
It
think
is descriptive more than prescriptive in that way.
it kind of does both,
Yeah.
because within each of the reason I'm talking about it, and the reason I like it and the only reason I'm talking about it is because this episode comes out on January 1, is that within each of those types, if you read the work of Don Rousseau, The Wisdom of the Enneagram is his book, and it's very, very good. Each of those types have different paths of spiritual growth. I realize I'm sounding woo-woo right now, which is fine, but what I find helpful in this idea is that the sins that I need to overcome and the virtue I need to pursue those are different for me than for Graham or for AJ, because my temptations are different from Graham or from AJ. They are going to have strengths that I don't have. And so what it looks like for them to grow up is going to look different than what it is for me to grow up.
Just like how you have a different besetting sin.
Yes.
The thing that you just can't, that it gets its claws in you that you just can't get out from under.
And a piece of what is trying to be named in the Enneagram is that besetting sin. And that
So what's your number?
it's believed
Or
to be...
what are the numbers?
So
Did you just ask?
Hey, what's
First
your number,
number?
hey,
Tom?
what's your number?
Hey, what's your number?
What sign?
And you'll
It'd
sometimes
be funny if somebody asked you in a bar for your number and then you
You're
gave
like,
them your Enneagram.
I'm a
I'm a
nine.
9 with a one wing.
It's like,
I'm
that
a
doesn't quite make
peacemaker.
any sense. So there are... Yes, Peacemaker is the name of one of them. So there
That is
are...
me. That's what I am. I'm number 9, Peacemaker.
And for anyone out there who's also woo-woo as you're listening to this and you don't like the idea of 9 numbers, the names are not the important part. It's the collection of traits that is. So if you don't like the idea of being a 1 through 9, then ignore that. If you don't like the idea of the titles, then ignore that. I will very briefly go through the... I encourage anyone who actually wants to do this to never take a personality assessment related to this and to just read the descriptions and then find which one lines up with you.
That's true.
Yes. Part of the reason that people like Myers-Briggs and Big Five is that they have tests that have been used for a long time that it's believed accurately find which of the types you are. And that's not true of the Enneagram. Does not pretend to be scientific. So there's that. So the 9 types, I'm going to go literally in the number of 1 through 9, but often people, anyway, whatever, Okay. So number 1 is the reformer. They are rational, idealistic, principled, self-controlled, and they often can be perfectionistic. Number 2 is the helper. I'm getting all this from the Enneagram Institute, which was founded by Don Rousseau, and I always get the guy's name. There are 2 of them. Anyway, I'll pull it up in a second. Number 2 is the helper. The helper is caring, interpersonal. They are generous and people-pleasing, and they can be possessive. Number 3 is the achiever. They are success-oriented and pragmatic. They are adaptive, excelling, driven, and image-conscious. Number 4 is the individualist, the sensitive, withdrawn type, expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, and temperamental. Number 5 is the investigator, and this is the one that I believe I am. They are intense and cerebral. They are perceptive, innovative, secretive, and isolated. Number 6...
Magby he has lots of secrets.
I don't know about that, but number 6 is the loyalist, the committed, security-oriented type, engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious. Number 7 is the enthusiast, busy, fun-loving type, spontaneous, versatile, distractible, and scattered. Number 8 is the challenger, the powerful, dominating type. Oh, I think AJ is a 7. I don't know if he thinks that.
I think I have traits of 7. I don't really strongly fit any of these, I don't think.
Which is fine. Number 8 is the challenger, the powerful, dominating type, self-confident, decisive, willful, and confrontational. Number 9, and this is what Graham thinks he is the peacemaker, the easygoing, self-effacing type, receptive, reassuring, agreeable, and complacent.
I love you guys.
Yes, there it is.
The test told me that I was also a number 9.
But that's also why tester.
But that's the thing, that doesn't sound like me at all.
Yeah. 9
I
does
just
not
want to
sound
let
like
you guys know that you're both doing a great job, and I think that you
Which
are.
is funny, 'cause
I just
you-
think you guys are great.
But you're often,
Let's go jump in the lake.
You know, it's kind of living in your... it's just funny because you're often described as a maverick, Graham, and that doesn't seem... Anyway, someone who knows the Enneagram better will be like, well, actually, the 9 with the 8 wing is really...
That's right.
Anyway. we keep saying wings. People often will be one number, but they will have traits of one of the numbers next to them, and that's what we mean by wing. So anyway, so why am I talking with you about this? Part of it is that there is a value in knowing yourself. And so that value can be accomplished through any of these tests, be that Meyers-Briggs, Big Five, Enneagram, name the 4 temperaments, name your test. Knowing yourself is helpful and useful. There's a danger in overdoing it, and there's a danger in pretending that you accurately and with 100% confidence know your personality. And that's what makes me nervous about the Myers-Briggs and Big Five, that they pretend to be scientific. They're not really scientific, but they get used a lot because people make money off of it. Anyway, there's that. And going into the new year, I don't know if this might just be me. You all might not struggle with this, but I often will set goals for myself that are things that I'm never actually going to accomplish, but I want to be like someone I'm not, and probably will never be. I could act differently, and I could be a totally different person, but there are certain things that I prefer, certain things that I like, that just it's because of who I am. In any case where that is sinful or wrong, obviously I should avoid or turn away from that. If it's non-virtuous, I should turn away from that. But there are amoral differences between people. Is that a fair way of saying it? There are things that we would call personality, by which we mean people act differently from other people. Sure. And so understanding how you're different and how other people are different from you, I think is very helpful. And that's what's been useful for me in studying the Enneagram for what brief amount I have, is to understand how other people see the world, not in a wrong way, but that other people just see things differently than I do. But then also, whatever your growth, development, maturation looks like is going to be different for each individual because we're each different. You have a strength, and if you're bragging on your strength all the time, you're not growing. So understanding where your weaknesses are, where your temptations are, I think is an incredibly helpful thing. And that's part of what has been helpful with the Enneagram. I think the 4 temperaments accomplishes this also, if you see in yourself a lack of one of those 4 categories. But that's the reason we're talking about that today.
Yeah, I think the balance, the idea of the 4 humors and the balance, I think is a very helpful one. I think that anything that moves you away from thinking anything that reinforces in your mind that these are sort of amoral distinctions, I think aren't very helpful. Like, there are clearly better ways to be a human being in this world, and people will use personality as a license for vice. And I think doing that is dangerous, or reinforcing that, or having something under the guise of science to give you license to make you a licentious person in regards to vice, I think is a great bad thing. It's kind of like, I always think about these personality tests like the Enneagram and the humors kind of like the old Farmer's Almanac. Like, it feels like woo-woo. Sometimes, it's maybe true a lot of the time. It makes no claims to precision, and if you decide to go more precise into it, it's not going to work because you're dealing with the natural world. The natural world is like, you could plant the 2 same seeds with the 2 same conditions in the 2 same area of your garden, and one seed's going to be healthy and one seed's not going to be healthy. Like, it's just, there's so many factors at play. But when you get to these Myers-Briggs, you get to these things that are trying to nail it to the wall and a little more precise, I feel like that quest for precision creates a lot more potentials for big blow-ups. It's less, maybe I've been reading too much Nassim Taleb recently, but It creates like too many opportunities for catastrophic failures, whereas Enneagrams or Farmer's Almanac or the 4 humors, since they're a little more fungible and since they're a little more forgiving, they are a little, they're not anti-fragile, but they're a little more, in their looseness, they actually have a strength to them, that they're not making claims to be precise. They're giving you a mental model to help you organize, but they're not saying they can carry the thing across the finish line. They're just telling you that it can sort of help you organize your way in the world and help you deal with men. But anybody who is in a long-standing relationship with a best friend or a spouse knows that if you try to if you're trying to resolve conflict reading books about something that your spouse generally is versus getting to know that individual person specifically. One is going to bear a lot more fruit and is going to be an easier path to resolving conflict.
Right.
And it ain't reading books.
Right.
It's the actually getting to know the individual specific person. I think there's an analogy to that with medicine, but I sort of I'm scared to go there.
I think I'm always leery of anything where it oversimplifies the human condition in a way that hasn't been, I mean, this is going to be a chronological snobbery thing again, but tested by time, right? And I think that this is recognizing the perhaps outcomes of a person rather than the motivating and driving forces. I'm leery of these specifically because Meyers-Briggs doesn't identify things as good or bad, right? There are a number of reasons why I could want to be with people. I could want to be
one
with...
is thinking and its antithesis is feeling, like,
Because we should do both,
Yes.
right? Isn't that
So my issue is that I could want to be with people for several reasons. One, because I can't be alone because I loathe myself, or because I like the accolades that come from being with people.
Exactly.
And so it could come from pride. It could come from sloth. I think that listening to the warp and weft of virtue and vice and good and evil as driving forces in the human person are a far better way to understand the human condition than saying, I just like to be around people, or I like to think before I act, right? Mm-hmm. Someone who doesn't think before they act needs chastisement, not to recognize that that's the kind of person they are.
spot on?
And so, like, even with those things, right, saying, like, plunking yourself down under saying, I'm a vicious person full of vice, that is dangerous because you are not allowing for the movement of the soul. And even then, you might be misunderstanding yourself, right? So anything that oversimplifies the human person or doesn't get at the driving forces of personality, and rather what it does is identify the edge fringes, is something that I am leery of.
Yeah.
So
shouldn't tell me how I want to live.
So to end this podcast, can I give you what my New Year's advice is to our listeners?
Can I give one quote to tie up? Sorry.
By all means.
This is, AJ just said it perfectly, and we should be leery of all of these models. And this is a quote I think I referenced in the last episode. This is attributed to a statistician, George Box. All models are wrong, but some are useful.
Yeah.
And that's what we're getting at with this.
So Mr. Box like to think outside of the box?
He's thinking outside the box. My New Year's advice to you, dear listener, since we're short on time, is someone once asked Eugene Peterson. Eugene Peterson, he just recently died. Yeah. Was a theologian, a Bible interpreter, and they asked him, how do you grow spiritually? And they're expecting some kind of answer about read your Bible or carve out devotional time or go to church. And Eugene Peterson said something that I have used as my model for spiritual growth. And if you take it seriously, it is a very powerful thought. He said, do the next right thing. That was it. And if you think about that, like, what is the next right thing that you need to do? When a situation comes, think, what is the next right thing? And that, I think, is a better mental model that's going to bear a lot more virtuous fruit in your life this year than more specifically categorizing yourself. At least that's my advice.
That's great.
All right. Thank you for listening. This has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. And did we even introduce ourselves? I'm AJ. I'm here with Graham Donaldson and Thomas Magby.
Hello.
And thank you for listening. If this is your first time, we're glad to have you. What a way to start the year.
Graham Donaldson, INTJ, number 9 on the Enneagram. What else do you need to know about me?
His patronus is a duck. So if you'd like to email us, you can reach us at veritasacademy.net. If you'd like to tweet at us, it's at CLSSCAL. Stuff, right? And then our website is classicalstuff.net, and you can find all our episodes there along with pictures and some hastily written bios. You can also get to know us. We respond to emails pretty regularly, so if you have something you want to say, by all means, or if you have a question or a suggestion for a podcast, let us know. All of that said, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.